Relatively easy to make one record, but it is much more difficult to make other records that follow up and are as good. I think it has not been easy.
For decades, Cliff Richard was one of Britain's biggest music stars, admired by millions, and known for a career that seemed almost untouchable. But behind the hit songs, sold-out concerts, and public smile is a story filled with personal loss, difficult choices, and moments that changed his life forever. At 85, his journey looks very different from what many people imagine, and some of the hardest chapters happened far away from the spotlight. Join us as we take a closer look at Cliff Richard's life, the challenges he quietly endured, and the truth behind the man millions thought they knew. Loss before fame. Cliff Richard's story did not begin in the bright lights of concert stages or recording studios. Long before he became one of Britain's biggest music stars, he was simply Harry Roger Webb, a boy growing up in a family that would face loss, uncertainty, and major changes. Many people know Cliff Richard for his long career, but the experiences that shaped him happened years before his first hit song. Harry Roger Webb was born on 14th October 1940 in Lucknow, which was then part of British India. His father, Roger Oscar Webb, worked in catering for the Indian Railways, while his mother, Dorothy Marie Dasley, came from a hard-working Anglo-Indian family. During Harry's early childhood, life seemed fairly stable. However, political unrest in India changed everything. As violence spread and the future became uncertain, the Webb family decided they could no longer stay. They packed up their lives and moved to England, hoping to build a safer future. Starting over was not easy. The family arrived in Britain with very little and had to adjust to a completely different way of living. Everything was new, from the weather to the culture and the neighborhoods where they settled. Money was tight, and life was far from comfortable. Like many families rebuilding after a major move, they had to work hard just to get by. Harry grew up understanding that nothing came easily, and that everyone in the family had to do their part. Despite those challenges, he found something that gave him excitement and purpose. As a teenager, Harry became interested in skiffle music, a style that was becoming popular in Britain during the 1950s. He listened closely to the music of the time and dreamed of playing it himself. Seeing his son's growing passion, his father made an important decision. When Harry was 16 years old, Roger bought him his first guitar. It may have seemed like a simple gift, but it became one of the most important moments in Harry's life. That guitar gave him the chance to practice, improve, and begin imagining a future in music. He soon formed a school vocal group called the Quintones before later joining the Dick Teague Skiffle Group. These early performances helped him gain confidence and develop the skills that would eventually launch his career. Cliff Richard would later speak warmly about his father and the encouragement he received during those teenage years. He believed his father recognized his potential before anyone else did. Looking back, Cliff once said that his father had given him his start. Sadly, Roger Webb never lived to see just how successful his son would become. His father's death came before Cliff's career truly took off, leaving behind a deep emotional wound. Losing a parent at such a young age is never easy, but the timing made it even harder. Cliff was only beginning to chase his dreams, yet suddenly, one of the people who believed in him most was gone. Years later, he admitted that the loss never completely disappeared. It simply became something he learned to live with. The death of his father also brought new responsibilities. As the oldest son, Cliff felt he had to step up for his family. His mother still had 3 younger daughters to care for, and as Cliff's music career slowly began to grow, he became an important source of support. He wasn't just trying to become a successful singer anymore. He was also trying to help provide financial security for the people he loved. That sense of responsibility stayed with him even after fame arrived. Instead of allowing success to change him completely, Cliff remained careful, organized, and disciplined. While many young stars enjoyed the freedom that came with fame, he often carried himself with restraint. Part of that came from knowing his family depended on him. There was little room to lose focus when others were relying on his success. But as Cliff's career reached incredible heights, another difficult choice quietly shaped the rest of his personal life. Stardom over family. Cliff Richard's life changed almost overnight when he released Move It in 1958. The energetic rock and roll song introduced a new sound to British audiences and quickly turned the young singer into a national star. At a time when American artists like Elvis Presley dominated the charts, Cliff became Britain's own rock and roll sensation. Fans rushed to buy his records, concert halls filled with screaming crowds, and his name became known across the country. Success came quickly, but it also demanded almost everything from him. As his popularity grew, so did his workload. Cliff wasn't just recording songs, he was constantly touring, making television appearances, filming movies, giving interviews, and attending public events. Every year brought another album, another concert tour, or another film project. His schedule rarely slowed down, leaving little time for an ordinary personal life. While many people his age were settling into careers, getting married, and starting families, Cliff was traveling from one city to another. His days were planned months in advance, and his private life often had to fit around his professional commitments. The excitement of success was real, but so were the sacrifices that came with it. Building a lasting relationship became much harder when so much of his life was spent away from home. As the years passed, marriage slowly became less realistic. It wasn't because Cliff didn't believe in love. Instead, he recognized that the life he had chosen made maintaining a marriage extremely difficult. Being away for long periods, living under constant public attention, and always putting work first created challenges that many relationships struggle to survive. One of the most well-known relationships in Cliff's life was with former tennis champion Sue Barker during the 1980s. Their relationship attracted huge media attention, with newspapers closely following every public appearance they made together. Many people believed wedding bells were only a matter of time. They seemed well-matched, successful in their own careers, and admired by the public. Cliff later admitted that he seriously considered asking Sue to marry him. It wasn't a casual relationship, and he cared deeply about her. However, after giving it careful thought, he realized he could not honestly make that lifelong commitment. He concluded that although he had strong feelings for Sue, they were not enough for marriage. Rather than make a promise he wasn't completely certain about, he decided it would be fairer to step away. Looking back, he has said that it would not have been right for either of them if he had proposed while still having doubts. Years later, Cliff spoke openly about these decisions in his autobiography, My Life, My Way. He explained that he had experienced genuine love throughout his life and had enjoyed meaningful relationships. However, he also admitted that marriage simply never felt like the right path for him. He believed that his career demanded a level of commitment that would have been difficult to balance with family life. Ironically, one of Cliff's biggest early hits was Bachelor Boy, a cheerful song about enjoying life before settling down. At the time, few people thought much about its title. But as the decades passed and Cliff remained unmarried, the song became closely connected to his personal life. The nickname followed him everywhere. Interviewers repeatedly asked why he had never married, and fans remained curious about the same question year after year. Although Cliff always answered politely, the repeated questions never completely disappeared. His personal life often became as much of a talking point as his music. Despite decades of success, many interviews eventually returned to the same subject. Why had Britain's biggest bachelor never started a family? In later years, Cliff gave perhaps his most honest explanation. He admitted that life had simply moved too fast. One recording session led to another. One concert tour was followed by the next. One opportunity created another opportunity. Before he realized it, the years had passed. The family life he may once have imagined had quietly slipped further away with each passing decade. And while marriage was one chapter that never happened, an even more painful series of personal losses was still waiting around the corner. Watching people go. For much of his life, Cliff Richard had a close circle of people he could depend on. While millions of fans knew him as a music star, those closest to him knew the man behind the fame. Over the years, however, that circle became smaller. One by one, the people who had stood beside him through different stages of his life were gone, leaving him to deal with a series of deeply personal losses. One of the hardest chapters involved his mother, Dorothy. She had supported him from the very beginning, encouraging him as he chased his dreams and watching him become one of Britain's biggest entertainers. But later in life, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, a condition that slowly damages memory and thinking abilities. Unlike a sudden loss, Alzheimer's often brings years of emotional pain for families, as they watch someone they love gradually change. Cliff remained close to his mother throughout her illness. As her condition worsened, he spent years visiting and caring for her while continuing to balance his busy career. Watching someone slowly lose their memories is heartbreaking, especially when that person has been such an important part of your life. There were times when Dorothy no longer recognized her famous son. For Cliff, those moments were especially painful. The woman who had helped shape his life could no longer remember many of the moments they had shared together. The illness lasted for more than a decade, meaning the family lived with this quiet sadness for years before her passing. When Dorothy died in 2007, Cliff had already spent a long time preparing himself emotionally. Even so, losing his mother was another major turning point. Although her suffering had finally ended, the emptiness left behind could not be easily replaced. He had lost another person who had believed in him long before the rest of the world knew his name. As difficult as that period was, more heartbreak was still to come. In 2016, Cliff experienced another painful loss when his sister Donna died suddenly. The timing made it even harder to accept. Only weeks earlier, Cliff had finally been cleared of the false abuse allegations that had dominated headlines for nearly 2 years. During that exhausting legal battle, Donna had been one of his strongest supporters. While many people questioned him publicly, she stood firmly by his side behind the scenes. Having someone in the family who never doubted him gave Cliff much-needed emotional strength during one of the darkest periods of his life. Donna's encouragement helped him face months of uncertainty, stress, and public scrutiny. Losing her so soon after his name had finally been cleared made the situation even more painful. Just when life seemed to be improving, another person he loved was suddenly gone. Cliff also experienced the loss of someone who had become much more than a business partner. For more than 30 years, his close friend and former manager Bill Latham was a constant presence in his life. The two shared a home in Sunningdale for many years, along with Bill's mother and later Cliff's own mother during her illness. Their arrangement reflected how close they had become over the decades. When Bill died in 2022, Cliff lost another person who had been part of his daily life for decades. Unlike many public appearances where he carefully guarded his emotions, Cliff openly acknowledged how deeply the loss affected him. It was another reminder that the people who had shared his journey from earlier years were gradually disappearing. But even after all of these personal losses, nothing would prepare Cliff for the public ordeal that nearly destroyed everything he had spent decades building. The scandal. For decades, Cliff Richard carefully built one of the most respected careers in British entertainment. He stayed away from many of the scandals that often surrounded celebrities and worked hard to maintain both his professional reputation and his private life. But in 2014, everything changed almost overnight. An investigation that never resulted in criminal charges would become the darkest chapter of his life, leaving emotional scars that he says will never completely heal. The ordeal began in August 2014, while Cliff was on holiday in Portugal. He was relaxing away from the public eye when police searched his home in Berkshire as part of an investigation into an allegation of historical abuse. Cliff was not even in the country when the raid took place. Instead of hearing about it privately, he learned that the search had become national news. What made the situation even more shocking was the way it was reported. Television viewers across the United Kingdom watched live footage of police officers searching Cliff's home. Helicopters flew overhead, while cameras captured officers entering and leaving the property. The BBC broadcast the raid as it happened, giving millions of people the impression that something very serious had already been proven. For Cliff, this was devastating. Even though he had not been arrested, the live coverage created an image that was difficult to erase. Many people naturally assumed that such a public police operation meant he must have done something wrong. In reality, the investigation was only beginning. No charges had been filed, and no court had found him guilty of anything. Yet public opinion had already started to shift. The investigation continued for nearly 2 years. During that time, Cliff lived under constant uncertainty. Every new headline kept the story alive, and every delay made it harder for him to move forward. Although he fully cooperated with the authorities, he had no control over how long the process would take or what people believed about him. Throughout the investigation, Cliff was never arrested and was never charged with any offense. Eventually, prosecutors concluded there was not enough evidence to bring charges against him, and the case was closed. Legally, he had been completely cleared. But by then, the damage to his reputation had already spread around the world. The emotional impact was enormous. Cliff later described feeling as though his entire life had been placed on hold. He struggled with anxiety that stayed with him every day. Sleeping became difficult because his mind never stopped thinking about the case. He admitted that the investigation was often the first thing he thought about when he woke up, and the last thing he thought about before trying to sleep. The stress also affected his physical health. Cliff said he lost weight during the ordeal because the pressure became overwhelming. There were moments when he feared the constant anxiety might seriously affect his heart. Instead of enjoying the success he had spent decades building, he found himself wondering how much of it might disappear because of an accusation that had never been proven. Even after the investigation ended, the fear did not simply disappear. Cliff admitted that everyday activities became much harder than before. Walking into public places no longer felt normal. He sometimes wondered whether strangers recognized him because of his music or because of the headlines they had seen. He questioned whether people were silently asking themselves if the allegations had been true, even though the case had been dropped. Determined to defend both his reputation and his right to privacy, Cliff took legal action against the BBC over its decision to broadcast the police raid live. The case became one of the most important privacy battles involving the British media in recent years. In 2018, the High Court ruled in Cliff's favor, deciding that the BBC had violated his privacy by showing the search before any charges had been brought. He was awarded substantial damages, and the ruling was seen as a landmark decision for privacy rights. But even after surviving the biggest crisis of his life, Cliff still had to face another challenge that would quietly shape the rest of his later years: the cost of living differently. At the height of his early success, Cliff Richard made a decision that surprised many people in the music industry. By the mid-1960s, he was already one of Britain's biggest stars, with hit records, sold-out concerts, and growing international fame. Most entertainers in his position were focused on becoming even bigger celebrities. Cliff, however, was thinking about something very different. In 1964, at just 24 years old, Cliff became a born-again Christian. His faith became a central part of his life and began influencing many of the decisions he made, both personally and professionally. While he never walked away from music completely, he admitted that he seriously considered doing exactly that. At one point, Cliff thought about leaving the entertainment industry to become a missionary or a teacher. He wanted to dedicate his life to serving others through his faith. It was a remarkable idea for someone whose career was at its peak. Most artists spend years trying to reach the level of success Cliff had already achieved. Yet he was willing to leave it behind if he believed that was the right thing to do. In the end, he decided to continue making music, but his faith remained a guiding force. Rather than changing careers, he changed the way he approached his career. He became more careful about the projects he accepted and the image he presented to the public. His beliefs influenced the songs he recorded, the performances he gave, and the way he conducted himself both on and off the stage. This choice made Cliff stand out from many of the entertainers of his generation. During the 1960s and 1970s, the music industry often celebrated rebellious behavior, wild parties, and controversial headlines. Many famous musicians built their public image around that lifestyle. Cliff chose a different path. He stayed away from much of the behavior that regularly filled newspaper gossip columns. Instead, he became known for his polite manner, disciplined lifestyle, and strong personal values. And even after building one of the greatest careers in British music, success still couldn't fill every empty space in his life. Empty spaces. By almost any measure, Cliff Richard's career has been extraordinary. Few artists remain successful for a handful of years, but Cliff managed to stay relevant for more than 6 decades. He became one of the biggest names in British music, sold millions of records around the world, and continued performing long after many of his contemporaries had retired. Yet behind all those achievements was a quieter reality. Professional success could bring applause, awards, and financial security, but it could not always provide the personal connections that many people naturally build throughout life. Cliff's rise began with Move It in 1958, but what makes his career remarkable is not just how quickly it started, it is how long it lasted. Music trends changed again and again over the years. Rock and roll gave way to pop, disco, new wave, and many other styles. Entire generations of artists came and went. Through it all, Cliff found ways to adapt without losing the qualities that made audiences love him in the first place. During the 1960s, he became famous with songs like Living Doll, The Young Ones, and Summer Holiday. In the following decades, he continued producing successful music, with hits such as Devil Woman, We Don't Talk Anymore, and Wired for Sound. Later, songs like Mistletoe and Wine and Savior's Day became holiday favorites for countless families across Britain. Each new chapter showed that he could evolve with changing audiences while still remaining recognizably Cliff Richard. His achievements are difficult to match. Over the course of his career, Cliff has sold an estimated 250 million records worldwide. He became the only artist in UK chart history to achieve a top 5 album across 8 different decades. That level of consistency is almost unheard of in popular music. While many singers enjoy one successful period, Cliff managed to build a career that reached generation after generation. From the outside, it looked like a life many people would dream of having. He traveled the world, performed before enormous crowds, received a knighthood, and became one of Britain's best-known entertainers. But success often hides the sacrifices required to achieve it. While Cliff was recording albums and performing on international tours, many of the people he grew up with were building different kinds of lives. They were getting married, raising children, celebrating birthdays together, and creating family traditions that lasted for decades. Cliff's calendar looked very different. His life was often planned around recording sessions, television appearances, rehearsals, and long periods away from home. Over time, Cliff admitted that fame made trusting people more difficult. Being one of the country's most recognizable faces meant that almost every relationship attracted public attention. It became harder to know whether someone genuinely cared about him or was interested in the famous person everyone else saw. Living under constant public attention naturally created barriers that many people never have to think about. He has spoken openly about how difficult it was to build lasting relationships while living such an unusual life. Constant travel left little room for stability, while fame made privacy increasingly rare. Even when genuine relationships developed, maintaining them required time and consistency that his career often made impossible. These were not problems that awards or record sales could solve. And as the years passed, growing older brought a whole new set of challenges that even a legendary career could not prevent. Away from the spotlight. Reaching your 80s is an achievement in itself. Continuing to record music, release albums, and perform in front of audiences at that age is something very few artists ever manage. Cliff Richard has never been content to simply live on memories of his past success. Even after more than 6 decades in the music business, he has continued working because music has remained an important part of his life. Many performers choose retirement after long careers, but Cliff has kept finding reasons to stay involved. He has continued recording new material, making television appearances, and performing live whenever he feels able. His passion for entertaining has never completely disappeared, even as the demands of performing have become much greater with age. At the same time, Cliff has been refreshingly honest about the realities of growing older in the entertainment industry. Rather than pretending everything is exactly the same as it was in his younger years, he has openly acknowledged that age changes both the performer and the business itself. In a 2025 interview, Cliff spoke candidly about one issue that had become impossible to ignore. He said many radio stations no longer played his music simply because of his age. He did not sound angry or bitter about it. Instead, he accepted it as part of how today's music industry works. Modern radio stations often focus on younger artists because they are trying to attract younger listeners. Cliff understood that reality, even if it was disappointing to experience firsthand. His comments highlighted a challenge that many veteran performers eventually face. No matter how successful someone has been, there comes a point when the industry begins looking elsewhere. New singers appear every year, musical tastes evolve, and media attention naturally shifts toward younger generations. Even an artist with Cliff Richard's extraordinary achievements cannot completely escape those changes. That does not mean his fans have disappeared. He continues to enjoy loyal support from people who have followed his career for decades. Concert audiences still appreciate hearing the songs that became part of their own lives. But Cliff understands that maintaining the same level of mainstream attention becomes harder with every passing year. Growing older has also brought physical challenges that simply cannot be ignored. Touring, which once felt routine, now demands much more energy. Long journeys, rehearsals, and nightly performances become increasingly tiring. Cliff has admitted that touring is now very wearing, especially compared to when he was younger. One concern matters more than almost anything else to a singer: the voice. Cliff has spoken honestly about waking up some mornings unsure whether his voice will perform the way he hopes it will. For someone whose career has depended on singing for more than 65 years, that uncertainty is difficult to accept. It is not something he can fully control, no matter how much experience he has. His comments about mortality have also surprised many fans because of how calm and straightforward they are. Rather than avoiding the subject, Cliff has acknowledged that, at his age, the future cannot be taken for granted. In one interview, he remarked, "I might be dead next year, so I don't even think about it anymore." The statement was not made for dramatic effect. It reflected the honest thoughts of a man who understands that time becomes more precious as the years pass. Despite these realities, Cliff has made a determined effort to stay healthy. Throughout his life, he has been known for his disciplined habits, and those habits continue today. He pays close attention to what he eats, exercises regularly, and still enjoys playing tennis. Staying physically active has helped him maintain the energy needed to continue performing far longer than many expected. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more fascinating stories about the lives of your favorite stars.